have another Mold Talks here. I'm Michael Rubino, author of The Mold Medic, president of All American Restoration. I have with me a special guest, Diana Dencker, and I'm going to introduce her. She's actually going to introduce herself. And very excited to have her here today and help share her story and empower those who may be going through similar challenges. Diana, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Yeah, like you said, I'm Diana Dencker, and I'm a mold survivor more than anything, really, because it's truly defined a large portion of my life, 2 decades. So I'm excited to talk to you about this and share with you. I work as a health coach, and I help people heal from any kind of mold exposure disorder and guide them towards the right resources. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's very needed, obviously, because as you've been through this, people go through mold exposure, and it's a holistic approach, right? It's not just air quality; it's improving your air quality, improving your diet, detoxifying. There's a holistic approach to this, and I'm just so glad that I'm here to be able to talk about the air quality piece, because I think it's something that most people, it's not even on their radar. So without further ado, I want to get into some questions to just help people get better to know you. When was it that you first noticed that you weren't feeling well?
I can trace back my first kind of sense of what felt like a serious issue with my health my first year of college. Okay. Dorm room life, lived in an old dorm room. I know what I know.
If you don't mind me asking.
Mm-hmm.
What year is that?
That
just so
is
we have a timeline.
2000. So
okay.
A long
you first started off feeling well around the year 2000.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you first figure out that mold was impacting your health specifically?
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, we can flash forward. A tumultuous time for me, but truly time has passed quickly now in retrospect. It was 19 years before I found out what was making me sick. 19 years. That is a long time.
Yeah, and I think it's an abode to the change that we need, because obviously for someone to go 19 years, right, without really identifying what could be causing or exacerbating, conditions that they're feeling. I mean, isn't that alarming? Something needs to change in our medical industry, don't you think?
It's terrifying. To be a patient feels like a great misalignment with the universe. You just wonder, how am I on this side of things? Why can't anybody help me or explain what is happening? And when you do have a sense of what is happening to you, there's a lot of gaslighting. So I experienced a lot of that with the majority of the doctors that I did see.
Yeah. Do you mind walking us through like what you mean by gaslighting and kind of the rudeness in which you're told that, it's all in your head or things like that?
I think denying symptoms that were actually happening to me. I think there's a huge disconnect in our modern medical system where people expect to see, they need a visualization of an illness. But mold is tricky because in the earlier stages, it doesn't manifest so obviously. So there's a lot of truth that I would be relaying to different physicians. And at times I was told, well, that can't happen. My limbs were on fire at one point. I remember saying, my limbs are on fire. And they're like, that can't happen. Your blood work's great. Like, you're fine. And I was always reverted back to the old, we have a psychiatrist, we have some Xanax, we have some Prozac, we have some Lexapro. It always came back to my mental health. Or I'm a thin woman. I was also a model for years in Los Angeles. And it was like, do you have an eating disorder? Well, no, I do yoga. I eat all the time. I mean, I study nutrition. I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I love eating. I'm an investor in a restaurant, and there was nothing that I could say to prove otherwise. By the time I'd walked in with these strange symptoms that nobody could label, that weren't exactly visible, the trust just didn't exist between the doctors and I. They never allowed it to. They never actually stopped to really listen. That's what I noticed. So pretty heartbreaking.
It's interesting. Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, first off, it's like you're experiencing something that is unusual, right? And a lot of people haven't come forward regarding, mold, especially in the year 2000. I mean, it was, it was definitely starting to create awareness in the 90s, but I not in the medical community, definitely not. And then you go to a doctor and they're telling you, you're self-destructive. You're probably not eating right. You're doing something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
or that you're crazy, right? And
Yeah.
it's crazy because the only craziness that I see is actually looking back at them, right? Because when I talk to people, I mean, we're talking at least 1,000 people that I've gone through in the past decade dealing with fixing people's air quality, right? Just focusing on that. The
Mm-hmm.
amount of stories that I've had where people go from doctor to doctor, doctor to doctor, doctor to doctor,
The doctor
and
to
finally find someone, right? That
endless.
is like endless, the endless circle here of nowhere, right? And not getting clear answers. And to me, it's so amazing because we take 20,000 breaths per day.
Wow.
That's a lot of air, right? If there's contaminants in the air, a lot of contaminants, as mold can do if it's growing inside your home, don't you think that it's a possibility to get sick due to the air that you're breathing? I mean, it's not
It's
even that I'm coming up with that. If you go on the American Lung Association's website, it says anything smaller than 10 micrometers, it poses a real health risk because they're so small. They get deep into the lungs, bypassing the respiratory tract and enter the bloodstream.
Mhm.
It,
Yeah.
it's just very interesting that like the dots are not being connected the way they should. I mean, there are people out there that are, but there needs to be way more. I mean, and I guarantee you with this question, we're going to get there. So, a lot of my clients tell me they go from doctor to doctor, almost endlessly, until they finally find someone who's like, hey, why don't you check your air quality? So I have to ask, how many doctors was it for you?
Honestly, I'd probably say 200. Probably about 200.
19 years full of doctors, probably, right?
I tried, I really tried. Um, at one point, my health insurance was so expensive in my 20s. It was beyond my affordability, given the career I'd had at the time. And I'm not sure who could have afforded health insurance at that time. My premium was $725 because I was living in a moldy home at that time, I believe. And it's just, it's just wild to think how much I was paying for this service, right? This insurance, barely. I was working myself to the bone to pay for this health insurance, to go see these doctors that had no answer or would again turn the blame back on me. And it was absolutely a great tragedy. Like, it was the great tragedy of my life, and it's hard to look back and think how many doctors missed the mark when the question truly was, how's your environment? Do you believe there's mold in your house? I mean, as a health coach, that's one of the first questions I ask. How is your environment? You know, and I believe I would have asked that 20 years ago, not knowing what I know now. Because, like you said, air is all around us. And if you understand that you're consuming it at a constant, and it was interesting for you to say how many breaths we take during the day. I'll tell you, it's fascinating. When I'm in a moldy environment, I like really stop breathing. And that is so bad for you, but my body was afraid to breathe. So
It makes
it's
sense.
just
I
wild
mean,
to think, what I know now, what I didn't know then. And quite frankly, to be honest, even if I'd known now a lot of what I know, I don't believe the outcome would have been different with the physicians that I had seen. It's beyond their scope of understanding. They fix things with chemicals. They're not really seeing that it's sometimes the chemicals, the mycotoxins from the mold, that are making someone sick. So what they were doing is they were adding medication. Take this, take this, take this. And at one point I was like, taking 6 medications that I just felt like I didn't need. And the biggest thing was, well, you're anxious. And I thought, but I'm anxious because I don't feel well, because you're not doing anything to help me, and you're blaming me. So it's a terrible place to be. It's zero fun, and it's really hard to want to wake up in the morning when that is your battle day to day. You know, you're fighting your body and you're fighting the medical system that is denying something that to me is just so obvious and basic. But I think that's what's happened. It's overcomplicated. They throw a million different things at modern problems instead of looking at the core issue, which is sometimes the most simple. How's the air you breathe? How is the food that you eat? And what is your, like, do you feel safe and secure and happy? I mean,
Yeah.
but,
No, it's true. Health and wellness obviously has to deal with genetics and predispositions and the environment. And I think that is, the environment's 2 factors, right? Things that you can control, such as, maybe your house is near a chemical plant, for instance. And then the things that you can control, like, the what you put into your body, right? And supporting your environment in a way where you're holistically healing yourself. And I think that we don't look at the environment as much as we need to be, which is what I'm trying to desperately create awareness. And why you're here today and sharing your story, and I so greatly appreciate. I know it's not easy to look back on these things and relive these experiences, but you're selfless right now, and you're looking to connect and help others, and I think that's amazing.
I just want to thank you for acknowledging me, because the acknowledgement, this is why I really respect what you do, why I'm really interested in everything, and I follow you, and I just am so grateful for the work that you're doing, because you're going to prevent so much suffering, so much unnecessary suffering. And I was a vessel of pain and sacrifice, and now I can be a vessel of experiential information. You are a vessel of knowledge and information, and you are sharing that with the world to protect other people from losing 20 years of their life to feeling unwell, which was my normal. But now it's not, and so it's like, wow, okay, that's profound work. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for seeing that and appreciating that. And of course, knowing what I know, it is, I have this great sense of responsibility that's come over me. That's like, I need to help people get this out there. I do believe you. I know what you went through is real, because I've seen 1,000 stories of this same exact thing, right? Of dealing with air quality issues and having real experiences and being shunned by the people that they're supposed to go to for help, for answers.
And sometimes people we love, sometimes the people we love.
And sometimes people you love. Yeah. I mean, I've had my fair share of talks and coaching with husbands and wives and family members, because obviously, it's hard to know something you've never experienced. And the best advice I can give, and I'm sure you would agree, is just support someone when they're going through a tough time. And, I'm a big advocate for listening to your body. If something is weird going on with your body, listen. It's not in your head, right? There's something that's happening. And so figure out why, right? And once you figure out why and you're able to do something about it, that's how you really overcome it, And so I want to get into some of the, just so people can kind of correlate. What were some of your symptoms?
I want to reference them. So I actually made a little note to myself, because I think incrementally I can give you the best information, at least for me, but it could really particularly help a lot of women, I believe. So for me, generally speaking, beyond the symptoms, I just want to say there's always been a theme in my blood work since college: severe anemia, unexplainable. I wasn't when I was a child. I wasn't when I was a teen. So it did start, and it correlated with my college years, as well as like low vitamins altogether. So with that being said, that means no energy. So I was like a walking zombie for years. I had bursts of energy at times if I was in the right place with the right airflow, I was able to work if I had an office that was like really modern and had a lot of like great air conditioning and airflow and windows open. But, I think ultimately that was kind of the most obvious thing, that chronic fatigue, that brain fog. Those 2 things are so destructive to the psyche, because you start to believe people when they're questioning your sanity. So you really lose an element of yourself and you start questioning your own intuition. So those were very scary. But if we were going to go into the things that really, really were torturing me, that started in college and extended through 2019, I would say number one, migraine stemming from the neck, also kind of in the eyes, light sensitivity, severe light sensitivity. I've had this ongoing joke that I'm a vampire because it's just like at night, but I wasn't always that way. Again, correlated to 2000, on and off throughout the years. Frequent urination and extreme pain urinating. I had 2 bladder distension surgeries and was even treated with some nonsense drug that is now being considered, it's blinded some women. So I took radical steps for the kidney and the bladder issues, chronic kidney infections. The external, I'd say it was like rashes, candida, chronic yeast infections, white-coated tongue, just, definitely had grainy eyes, red eyes a lot. And I think the worst symptom of all was the anxiety because it made me feel unpredictable. And I didn't know why I'd freak out. I didn't know my triggers because it was impossible to identify at the time, And I'd say that is what really stuck with me throughout the years too. So those are the things that I definitely dealt with. I mean, if we want to get into, I once lived in a home that I believe was so moldy that my roommate at the time had 7 miscarriages. I had moved in because her husband had moved out. She now has 2 happy, healthy babies. She moved out of the house. She had 2 happy, healthy babies. That is wild to me. So at that time, that was like a house of horrors. So I'll tell you, the psychiatric kind of like tricks mold plays on you. And when I thought back to college, I thought, well, I had anxiety. I was kind of having crazy nightmares, night sweats, terrors. I mean, it's really terrifying what happens to you. Like, I understand why mold and haunted houses in movies are so intertwined. These haunted homes are moldy. They make you psychiatrically like question everything. You don't feel like yourself. You have like out of body experiences and it's super scary. So I definitely say those. That's a lot of, that's a lot of things to experience for 20 years always.
Yes, yes. And think about the psychological effects too, on top of all of that, of not feeling well for 20 years. And I know some of my clients have talked to me about, some of the difficulties there and the dark thoughts, and, it's just really challenging. And I'm glad you're here sharing your story 20 years later. You never gave up. You kept fighting. You figured this out, and there's a much positive story that's come out of this. And I just want to thank you for sharing this and reliving that. And it means a lot. So with that being said, how did it impact your life and being able to do normal everyday activities?
Most of my friends would tell you that I'm not reliable, but if you knew me prior to 2000, I was the most reliable. I'd give anyone a ride. I was always available. I answered my phone. Scatterbrained, I became scatterbrained. I couldn't really give friends energy. I was depleted. And my personal life really suffered. My relationships suffered. There was kind of a lack of trust or understanding. Well, get up and take a walk. Well, I'm really tired. I really feel like there's an elephant on my chest. I can't breathe. Get up and take a walk. You'll feel better. And really, that's not the answer. Somebody that doesn't feel well needs to hear. They want to hear, like, what I noticed, they want to hear, what can I help you with anything? Like, what can I just listen to you? But no one ever offered that, and I felt myself feeling more and more isolated. It was a staggeringly painful 20 years at times. There were very high moments when I felt well, but there was always a theme of disappointing people because I couldn't always keep a promise or go out at night. Or at my job suffered incredibly. In 2015, I moved into a new home, and a mid-century home, and I'd just taken a job as a senior executive at an entertainment company. And I was super excited. And within a few months, I started to get really sick again. it was cyclical. I want to remind people, when you change your environment, the situation changes. That's why environment's so important. So, I had some good years intermittently thrown in, where I was really able to enjoy my life. So I had snippets of it. I had snippets of the success I would have had in my career, right? But at some point, there was always a hindrance of, oh my gosh, the symptoms are back again. So in 2015 was the greatest one. I started to feel really sick. I couldn't go to the bathroom. My legs began to go numb. My organs felt numb. I had neuralgia. I felt like my legs were on fire. I went to the ER. They sent me home 5 times. And by the time I finally went back, a friend had carried me in because I couldn't walk, and I hadn't relieved myself in over 24 hours. And I don't know if anybody even can understand what that is like. I was hysterical and wanting to be seen, and I couldn't urinate. I couldn't. And by the time they saw me in the ER, they immediately admitted me. Catheter in. Oh my gosh, she's sick. That was a really long hospitalization. They were suggesting things like colostomy bags. I couldn't feel my legs. My nerves were just shot. I mean, I couldn't stand up. My organs weren't working. There was such like a complete like systemic dysbiosis, like nothing was working in my body. And imagine I just got in my dream job. I'm an executive and I have to leave for a few weeks. I mean, I had to go back to work with the catheter strapped around my leg. That's not normal. And that was when they actually diagnosed me with something called systemic lupus, which I believe is often a diagnosis people with mold illness are given. I believe that's how mold manifested in my body. I believe it manifests differently in everybody. That's just my inherent belief and what I've kind of visually seen. I can't speak scientifically, it's not my expertise, but it's interesting. So it's been heartbreaking. And I will use the word again, painful, heartbreaking, vessel of pain and sacrifice, like disappointing people, feeling like nobody's listening to you. I don't think there's anything more lonely. That is more lonely than alone. And so to be also physically unwell and not be able to trust your limbs will work. Yeah, it really takes your life in a completely different direction. I often wonder, would I have children? Would I have been married? My illness was always the hatchet in the relationship, the hatchet in the next tier of my success in my career. Anytime I got my momentum, somehow it would just come crashing down again. This was the theme of my life, and nobody could figure it out.
This is, it's heartbreaking to hear, that someone can go through this and feel so alone. And, it makes me just so awake to the fact that I need to keep doing this, keep fighting for people like you that are going through similar challenges that have no idea. And you mentioned something earlier that's a good point. Mold is going to manifest in different ways in different people. I have heard mold being an issue and exacerbating a diagnosis called Hashimoto's, POTS, PANS and PANDAS. There's similar symptoms with Lyme disease, right? And misdiagnoses between the two. There's a lot more that needs to be researched and studied. And it's important to remember that mold is actually a blanket term used to describe 100,000 different species in the fungal kingdom, and so, when you really look at it from a species to a species, they're going to impact different individuals differently. And then there's just the amounts, the exposure levels. And we have no idea about any of those, but we can make pretty good references. We can see what's going on inside, what's going on outside. Inside's 10 times higher than outside. It's a lot more to be breathing in than you normally would. And so, we can make these steps. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't. What we do need to know is that it can be a problem. Air quality can absolutely cause and or exacerbate issues. And so we need to be cognizant of that and do something about it. So I want to, again, I'm going to keep thanking you because is a very powerful story that you have. And
thank you. It makes most people.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to say it makes most people very uncomfortable. Nobody wants to hear about mold sick girl. Nobody wants to thank her for her story.
Well, I do.
Sorry that happened. They don't
this.
take it serious. They don't think mold can translate into like this horrific thing that can. I'll never forget. I was dating someone for, just to tell you what this will encapsulate how it was received. I was really healing in 2019 or 2019. I'd attempted to date again, and I was dating someone, and they said, I'm so tired of hearing about mold. It's like, one, it's not like a brain thing. It's not a brain injury. And frankly, it's not really going to disrupt someone's life. She was a realtor, this woman I was dating. I mean, it was like shocking to hear a realtor.
Yeah.
She's completely clueless as to what mold means. And yet, isn't she the one that knows the term remediation? Isn't she the one that's selling homes and saying it's been inspected by mold? How do you not know what happens to families that live in moldy homes? So she was, and then she said, it's really sad because my friend has cancer and she has 2 children and she may die and you're playing the victim. And I said, I'm sharing my story. I've never played the victim. I've only shared my story. I've been vocal because I had a desperation to be heard, to feel like I existed, to feel seen. And so many people ignored that. Friends, strangers. I mean, my greatest connections have come from people within the mold and health and wellness, community, and also from clients. When I used to work as a beautician and cosmetologist, I had clients that had moldy homes and they were feeling very sick from it. And they were like, tell me more. So it's usually something only people that like have experience with want to hear about. It's almost, if I can't see it, I don't want to hear about it. Yeah. So imagine
it's a lack of knowledge.
That in human form. Imagine being mold girl in human form. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see it. I need you to continue to pretend like you're happy. I did things from like, I shot a campaign for hair. I was a model. I was deathly sick that day. I absolutely wanted to collapse and die. And I did it with a smile, and it was a huge national hair brand. I had to learn how to be the greatest actress of all time. I had to pretend like my brain was working. I had to smile when it hurt to exist. I had to feel so many. I was on the receiving end of so many devastating comments, so many throwaway comments, so many like, we're tired of like autoimmune stuff. We're tired of it. Well, this is my truth, and I can only relay it to you and tell you that I'm not feeling great, and I need you to know this because this is why I'm failing at friendship or career or relationship. But apparently that's playing the victim card to a lot of people because they're just not educated on the subject, and I don't fault them for that. I've learned everything about mold because I've experienced it. Most of us, we don't go become experts on something unless we really, really have a passion for it. So it's become my passion to help share my story. And I understand that not everybody's going to be the audience, but the truth is, if we make everyone our audience, will that not reach more people? Will that not prevent somebody's family member, somebody's brother and sister, somebody's mother from having the same experience that I did? I will continue to talk about it, although people really do like to silence us. It's wild, the disconnect, the emotional disconnect.
And I've seen it. And, I am attacked on my Instagram every now and then by people who not only don't know any better, but refuse to actually look and think about it and do the research, and I think that ultimately, most humans are compassionate people. And I feel that if we can do a good job to get the right information out there so that it picks up steam and people actually spend the time to listen and educate themselves, I think we have a good shot at creating some positive change here. And no one should ever go through what you went through or feel the way you felt. And if anything, if not for nothing, if you're watching this and maybe you're watching this because someone recommended you to watch it. Maybe you haven't gone through mold. It's so important by listening to this story to support your loved ones, the people that actually are going through this, because it's real. And when someone experiences something, even if you can't understand it, you got to remember it's real to them. Like that's what they're feeling. That's what they're going through. This isn't an alternate subjective reality. This is really real, right? So I think if people could have supported you better throughout this journey, you probably would have, had probably made some realizations, probably would have, moved the needle further faster, right? And so I think it's so important. I tell people all the time, support the people around you, have compassion.
Compassion, that's it. I mean, truly listen to people and understand that just because you haven't experienced what they have, that their experiences are very real. We need to really normalize that people's experiences are real. We live in a culture that really, a society that likes to throw away emotion and feeling. And
judge,
to do that to someone that is really like suffering, and mold sickness is torturous. It affects like you from head to toe. I went bald. Okay. I went bald. I had to shave my head twice. And I loved it because I'm a creative person. But I imagine a lot of women or even men would be devastated to have to do that. And, I looked like such a sick human being, and I was being received with throwaway comments like, it's not cancer. Well, no, it's not. But I wouldn't mind a diagnosis like that at that point, because then you have exactly what's happening to you, and the resources and tools you have. It's better knowing than not knowing.
Well, 19 years. Think about what you just said.
Madness.
Think about what you just said. You were like, it's not cancer, but it drives you to think like, I almost wish it was, just so that you can understand, because everyone understands cancer, right? They understand. Maybe they don't even have to go through cancer to understand cancer, right? Because there's a diagnosis. It's commonly accepted. Mold exposure or indoor pathogen exposure is such a new thing. There's conflicting and missing information out there. There's 20-year studies from the NIH that have still never concluded. And so when you look at all this stuff, and there's a lot of information that people are choosing purposely not to connect the dots on, but nonetheless, it's there. And so because it's not this, commonly accepted diagnosis with a pill that you could take to solve all your problems, right? It's not looked at that way. And so, to have to say like, it would take me having cancer for you to really understand what I'm going through. That's really heartbreaking. And I can imagine that just hearing what you went through and the loneliness and understanding. I mean, like I said, people should not have to go through that. And I'm imagining that, with what you do now in your practice and kind of going through people, you can rationalize what you went through and make sure that others don't. And, I think hopefully you look at that as a gift now.
This is my greatest gift, this is my greatest gift. What else do you do? You stay attached to your victim story, or do you move forward and deal with what's happened to you, accept it, and move forward? A lot of people with mold illness that I've worked with don't accept it.
Sure.
It's even because of the society that doesn't accept it. I'm like, you guys, just accept this happened to you. Like, this is very real. And you have the power to change it, which is really cool. And that's like a whole nother conversation. But, when we talk about what cancer does to people, it diminishes them, it wastes, it is a systemic dysfunction. It's the body's immune system, the T cells, that they're not functioning the way they need to. My T cells were depleted. My bones ached. I had a seizure. I had convulsions in my brain. I was down to 82 pounds. I have photos to share with the people listening if they want to see the reality of what it is. I didn't look any different than somebody with cancer, except you guys, not you guys, but the world was denying me my truth. They were telling me I was fine. And so were the doctors. And that's just the craziest part. Again, you know, you had said that early on in our conversation, and just that detachment from like, you see me, right? I've now shaved my head off because I'm going bald. I have the darkest under eye circles. I've lost life. I'm jaundice. I'm barely standing. I'm 82 pounds. This isn't anorexia. This is like a poisoned human being. Now I can see it, but really when you're in it, I mean, I'm sure, do you ever talk about mold brain with anybody? That's very real. When you're in it, you can't even think cognitively to think that it could be your environment. You're so deep into like your pain, and it's really easy to get trapped in a low place because your brain is not working. Your cells have been damaged on a deep, deep level from these mycotoxins. You know, asparagus, it's black mold. That was my poison. It was the worst of the worst. It's the bad boy of all of them, or bad girl. And it's running.
It's one of the most prevalent molds in people's homes.
Yeah. So
aspergillus is one of the most prevalent molds that I find in people's homes all of the time. It is a mycotoxin producing mold, as you mentioned, and it you know, it can be, especially if you think it's not a problem and you allow it to persist and get worse. You know, that's when, you know, these things happen, and when you're living in a dorm and the school doesn't know and the doctors don't know, so you go to the doctor. You know, there's such a general lack of knowledge that allows this system to exist, where you can suffer and not actually know how to get better. And that's what we're fighting for. And I want to shift and end with some hope here, because a lot of people who are going to watch this, they may be going through, they may be, you know, in the early stages of the 20-year stage that you went through. And I want to give them with some hope. And by doing that, I have to ask, so when did you start to feel better?
Oh my gosh. I love this part of the story, because this is what brought me back to life. It was late 2018. I was sharing a Venice Beach apartment with my partner at the time. He was also pretty unwell. He developed some Crohn's, and there were definitely some signs. I mean, we were both just looking gaunt and unwell. We couldn't function, and there was something very wrong. And I finally had this instinct, and I thought, oh, it might be mold. But he had this fabulous doctor friend, Dr. Robin Berzin, and she had started this great functional medicine practice that you become, it's like a membership fee per month. And she had welcomed us in with like an honor. I couldn't really afford it at the time, because really quickly, I just want to remind everybody that's listening, mold exposure is expensive to heal from. There's extensive dental work that has to be done. You have to remove mold from like your face, your organs. There's so many different therapies that you have to do, and you have to go step by step. So it's very expensive. So I was very excited. My boyfriend at the time was like, Dr. Berzin's going to give us this like deal, and we're going to go see this functional medicine doctor. And I was like, we're going to figure out what's wrong with me. And I was so lucky. She had mold exposure and poisoning. And I sat down with her, and she listened to me for 45 minutes. She listened to me. That's the secret. She wanted to go through my entire history. When did I first feel? It was very much like this interview between us, right? When did you first start to feel badly? What were the symptoms, and how did it affect your life? She wanted to know the whole story. She wanted to know the emotional aspect and that impact as well. And within moments, she thought, I'm going to test you for mycotoxins. Is there any way, the magic question, that you guys have mold in your home, and that's why you're both so sick? And I was like, yes. And my boyfriend was like, no. And I was like, yes, because I'd been frustrated and thinking that was the issue for a while. So inherently, we do know. When we finally get to a point of knowing, it becomes very obvious. She did a test, called me a week later. I kind of remember dropping the phone. I'd been in the emergency room like every night at that point and getting sent home. So I was really in a desperate place. And when she called me just to say, you have severe mycotoxin poisoning, your cortisol level is equivalent to a 95-year-old woman's. I cannot believe you are standing up. Thank your mother, thank your grandmother for the genetics. You technically should not exist. You know, my boyfriend at the time got a similar call. I was so grateful. I just went, I dropped the phone. I said, I'm moving out. I'm moving out right now. As I was grabbing one of my portraits off the wall, I found an apartment that day. I was like, new life. I'm going to get healthy. She's going to detox me. I know what the problem is. I finally figured it out. No one's ever been happier to get a diagnosis that they were moldy. They were poisoned by mold. So I took a painting off the wall, a piece of art, and huge, like family of mold. Took another painting down, more black mold. It was everywhere. So it all revealed itself at once, right? Which was, again, another cataclysmic. What an aha moment to have, to then not only get the call, but to physically see it. So I was able to like identify it, and I was like, that's my enemy and I will never suffer again. And I haven't awesome. Because I'm healing ever since. And when you know your enemy, it is so much easier to defeat it. But people really need to step up and say, this is dangerous. This can damage somebody. Please try to help people. Please try to guide them towards environmental awareness in their own home, which is where we spend the majority of our time. That's where we get our restorative sleep. It's the last place we want to be poisoned. So I'm thrilled. I'm healing. It wasn't easy. Detox was very hard. But once I really started to feel better, my personality came back to life. I gained my weight. My hair grew back. My brain started working. Oh my gosh, it was the first time. I was an avid reader in college when I had stopped reading for 20 years. I'd been reading on and off when I had good weeks. But for the most part, it was really difficult for me to read more than 2 lines without having to start over. So I just went on like a reading binge, and I just read for like weeks. It was like vacation for my brain. It was working again. My whole body started to work in this like symbiotic way. And now I just have gratitude and joy. And every day I wake up, I feel good. I take deep breaths. I breathe like I hadn't been breathing for 20 years. I'd been afraid to breathe because the air was so toxic. And now I breathe deeply every day, and it's a gift. It's not torture. There's no elephant sitting on my chest. My bones don't ache. I'm not tired all the time. I'm able to have conversations and feel connected to people and maintain friendships and jobs and happiness. So I like to remind people there is like a really happy ending. And it wasn't just the detox and all that, because I think it's important for me to say one thing. If I'm going to really say one thing, it's when you're doing the detox and you're doing all the stuff that the doctors are suggesting, do not forget that your brain is your most powerful tool. And I'd hit kind of a wall with detox for a minute. And my doctor, Dr. Rachel Gonzalez over at Parsley, the woman, the healer that she is, the great listener, she had suggested something called dynamic neural retraining, which is kind of like neuroplasticity, essentially. It's just retraining your brain to not perceive threats as like highly dangerous. So once I really kind of integrated the detox and the new diet and a safe environment, number one, get out of your toxic environment, a safe environment, and some neuroplasticity, I was able to have the life that I'd imagined, that I'd wanted for myself, that was taken from me, So I'm making up for lost time. I'm enjoying my life. I'm adventurous. I'm healthy. I'm happy. I'm radiant. I'm in the best shape of my life. And I wake up smiling. I go to bed smiling, and there are no bad days.
Well, that's awesome. I'm really happy to hear about the transformation and the big success you're having, and overcoming this and better than ever. That's awesome. And I want to ask, what is something that, it may not just be one thing, but what is something that you want to share with others that you think can help them? Is there any last words that you can recommend to others with similar challenges?
Do not stop searching for your answer, because once you have your answer, it's very hard to defeat the human brain. Believe it or not, especially when we're fighting to feel good, your brain is your friend. And I want to remind people when they're told their immune systems are a mess and their immune systems are failing them, that's actually not the case. My immune system hadn't been failing me. It had been protecting me for 20 years. The mold didn't manifest into cancer as it often does. My body, my immune system, they were my warriors. They were my friends. And I was being told otherwise. So I want to remind people, your immune system is your friend. It wants to help you. I'm not sure why modern science likes to attack it and say it's the cause of, it's the great disruptor. The disruptor was the chemical toxic element, right? Or the natural toxic element. Nature, the fungus among us, can be very scary. So we have
fungus
to be
among us. I like that.
Yeah, and we really have to be aware of our power, our mental power, the way we perceive things. You can heal from mold and you can do all the protocols, but your brain may still detect it as poison. I can walk into a moldy building now and I'll know it's there, but I won't have any side effects. So I do have my life back. So what a lot of people don't understand is they do the work with the doctor, they start to feel better, but then, they have a little exposure, migraine, bone pain, itchy eyes, nausea, and that's not normal. You don't have to live suffering just because you've been exposed to this source. You can actually retrain your brain and your body to understand how to react to it, to no longer perceive it as a threat, but also stay away from it. Let's be more conscious about our environment. Let's really talk about air filters and the fact we need them. We live in a modern world. I mean, everybody should get an air filter. That's my, a really good one, like a solid quality, invest the money, save, ask for it for a holiday. In the place where you sleep for 8 hours, you should be allowed to have quality air. That is how humans were meant to live.
That's awesome. Diana, I'm speechless. I mean, you took over the show and you owned it. And I really, really appreciate everything that you shared. Thank you so much for helping me raise the volume on such an important topic. I think I'm totally moved by everything that you said. And I think this is a really powerful episode, and I hope a lot of people can learn a lot from what you shared today. Thank you so much. Before we go, where can people connect with you? You're a health coach now, and honestly, as you mentioned earlier, people feel alone. They need someone to connect with that went through similar challenges that they can ask questions with. And so if someone wants to find you, how would they do that?
Yeah, so I'm actually about to launch my new coaching business, which is going to be called the Wildling Nutrition. It's kind of just integrative, whole body nutrition. So not it's what's on and off the plate, right?
Right.
And I'm hoping to really specifically work with mold patients, as that's kind of who I've been working with at this point. It's just something that really speaks to me. It's why I really connect with you. So thank you. And ultimately, if people want to email me, dianadencker@gmail.com, you can directly contact me. I do have free time right now. I haven't launched yet, so I'm still available to some people if they need resources or anything that they need. And I'll provide you updated stuff once I do launch. But all that said, I just truly hope that we learn to better listen to each other. And I want to thank you for being an incredible way for me to share my experience with the exact people that need it the most right now.
No, thank you. That means a lot. It feels good to be able to stand up and fight for people like you that, have went through just such debilitating times. And I love the story and how you came. This experience empowered you, and you came back out stronger than ever. And now you're going to basically share what you've learned and help others. I mean, this is amazing. And this is how we build a community. And I believe it's going to take an army of us to make the change, because we really need to show that this is a problem. And I've done a tremendous amount of research, both in the field fixing people's homes and watching the differences in their test results, both in the house and in the body. And so I know it's real. And, I think people are starting to wake up to this. And Yeah, I thank you, because this is going to be helpful, in that fight. And thank you for the work that you're now doing.
Thank you.
It's important, and I'm glad that people can connect with you. Thank you for providing your email. And
Yeah, one of the primal, beautiful things that you're doing is it's so primal and beautiful. You're trying to provide safe spaces, safe homes for people. What is more primal and more like Papa Bear and beautiful than that? That's being a good human. Thank you. We all need to really tap into that. Let's just be good humans. Let's do
all
good.
we need to be good, compassionate people, and help those around us. And that's what I've done. I've found something that I know is helpful, and that's what I'm choosing to spend my time on, is getting that word out and helping others. And thank you
That's
for
right.
connecting with me today.
And I love what you're doing, and I love what I'm doing. 20 we talked about. I mean, you've just thanked me endlessly, which is so wonderful. I'm so grateful. All the thanks and praise. I don't know what to do with it. It's so much. I don't know. It feels really good, and it allows me to realize I'm on the right path. And I did want to just close with, I've forgotten my thought. Who knows? Mold brain. Nope, not mold brain, because I'm no longer poisoned. Thank you very much, Michael.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. I look forward to seeing what you do, what comes to fruition. Thank you.
Perfect.